This is the Misconnected Podcast. If you listen to episode 12 and are continuing, welcome back. If not, you may want to go back to listen to episode number 12 since this is part 2 of a 3-part episode. We're still talking sexual assault. The last episode was geared towards women. This episode, number 13, is addressing the man's perspective. And having said that, ladies, I would encourage you to continue listening to this episode also. Just as a reminder, episode number 14 will be a summation of this topic, both for men and women. It's sort of like a final analysis, if you will. So quick side note, not too long after I recorded the last episode, I was at like a get together and a woman told a very convincing story of how a celebrity who's been in the news and is an accused rapist allegedly sexually harassed her in the past. And it's not a long story, but nonetheless, it's a very disgusting story. And I obviously wasn't there on the alleged night, but she did not sound like a woman that was telling a lie. And her story really lines right up with what's been reported in the media about this person. And I just thought, like, fuck, man, how many women has this guy assaulted sexually? It just sort of blows my mind. So, fellas, in our dealings with women, we need to remember to be respectful and honorable, however that looks for you. It doesn't mean you have to turn in your man card. It doesn't mean you have to be a chump. It doesn't mean you have to unnecessarily take shit from a woman. We can still be masculine and be respectful. So let's lose any suggestion that being strong comes in the form of being an abusive fucking asshole or a bully towards the opposite sex. If you encounter a woman who you can't be civil and or respectful with, point your shoes in the opposite direction and walk away. Sexual assault and rape, they're crimes that it goes without saying, it can fast track your life into darkness for obvious consequences like prison, financial ruin, and just severe reputation damage. You don't want that. So let's dive a little bit deeper and talk about your romantic footprint. So fellas, something you may want to keep in mind when you're dating, the string of experiences you had with women, whether they're hookups, casual dating, or long-term relationships, you're creating a romantic footprint. It's like your history. All right. So in other words, if you had a history of civility and healthy interactions with women, your past will appear as it should be, like clean, respectful. If you're the other kind of man where there's a pattern of very sketchy and hostile interactions, well, now your dating life is starting to look like an episode of one of those trashy daytime talk shows. This is where a lot of public figures get into trouble, and I won't name names. It's not what I do, or nor do I intend to with this podcast, but you may have seen the same ones that have been popping up in the media in the past few years over and over again. And some of these alleged victims are saying the same things about these guys. The guys that build reasonable doubt in the face of allegations generally call women at a reasonable hour. They don't stalk a woman's social media. They don't get physically violent, have public outbursts. I mean, you know the kind of person. Like, you want to be the other guy. He's the polar opposite of those kind of individuals. And I've met a lot of great women in my past. But, you know, we can agree that certain types of women may challenge your ability to be civil. Some are very dishonest. Some play very dangerous games. Some will try to mind fuck you for whatever reason. We all get it. But you should steer clear of that type of woman. And I don't want to try to get too too psychoanalytical, but I wonder if some men use sexual assault as an instrument to retaliate against those kind of women with those negative attributes. It's something I think about or have thought about at times. Maybe the thought has crossed your mind. If you have thoughts on that, send an email. So moving on, like I'm not one for revenge and romantic retaliation. It is not the way to respond to a woman that is not being kind and being a quality person towards you. So like, what's the problem for guys? In a quick review, what I mentioned in the last episode is how men get into this problematic path that leads to sexual assault and or rape. False allegations aside, some men run through a woman's stop sign. And just as a reminder, that's crossing a woman's boundary of intimacy. And that can happen purposely or it can happen inadvertently. The second path is where there's an innocent miscommunication where the woman feels violated. So how do these two scenarios develop? So where I think the misconnection is, and this is based on my experience and observations and knowing guys for decades. First one is guys will conflate a woman's, like her sexy attire or her dress, as an invitation for their pleasure and or advances. Number two, confusing a woman's selective participation in dating him or you as permission to take things further sexually. Number three, they're not seeing the woman's stop signs. Number four is when you confuse, or when a man confuses timid or indecisive behavior with a willing shyness. Last one, number five, is, there's guys with overinflated self-images. They think they're a lot more important and maybe a lot more entitled than what they are in reality. So if we go and we reconnect the dots on this, look, it's understandable to assume that a woman that wears makeup, dresses sexually provocative, or comes to your home, to some degree, she may be broadcasting some level of sexual readiness. I think on a pure biological level, like nobody can blame a heterosexual man for being attractive to those type of things or those type of elements that a woman exudes. But that broadcast of her readiness doesn't necessarily mean it's for our benefit on an individual level, right? Like it could just be a stylistic choice in the way that a woman dresses every day. Plus, I hear a lot of women say that women dress for other women and not necessarily us. Just a mental note. Maybe it's some type of competition or I don't know. Personality-wise, her laughing and having what may feel like a good conversation applies also. I think women sometimes grease that conversational wheel with a little exaggerated interest to keep a courtship moving along and sort of stroking our egos. It's not to say that a woman may not like you, but you may not know if she likes you that much or enough to want to have sex. In her mind, she may have a clear boundary or a clear sense of how far she wants to take things. Now, for those men that consciously and deliberately feel they can act in an assaultive way towards women, or, they feel like they're owed sex and they feel like they can take sex from a woman, maybe prison or some mental institution is the best place for them. Like that, I don't quite understand, but I know it's just really, really wrong and dangerous and all kinds of other negative shit. As for the other guys, some of you or some of us innocently aren't good at gauging a female's readiness, and so you may fumble in the courtship and make the woman uncomfortable, which sometimes is understandable. Some men try and convince themselves that all of the above, like her presence in his company, sexy dress, playfulness, are reasons why they felt a woman was game for sex or some kind of, sexual advance. Why? I think maybe some guys need to believe that was the case. They need to feel that there was an opportunity. They need to feel that they were given a hint. Maybe they're looking for a reason to pull the trigger on making a so-called move to get the physical affection that they want from a woman. But listen, a woman, this is what I've learned over the years. A woman that wants to have sex with a man will give that man the right opportunity in due time. Could be a week, could be a month. It just really depends on so many elements. You, her, the situation, whatever. Some women may even get a little pissy when she's ready to take that step towards sex, but you as a man aren't moving as fast as she would like you to. It happens. It's happened to me a few times for different reasons. But she will either follow your lead if you know how to court properly, or she will give you direction to a path she's comfortable with. And I would also throw in there, she will give you direction towards a pace she's comfortable with. So for example, say you're dating 2 or 3 weeks and you're at a point where you're making out with kissing and groping, but she's not letting you remove her clothes. That, my friend, is the stop sign I was talking about. You sound to be on the right track if that's the scenario, but she's clearly wanting to work at a slower pace for whatever reason. Maybe she's not sure about you. Maybe she's transitioning out of another relationship with another guy. Who knows? You may have to wait and see, or not. I think in most cases, she's made a decision very early on whether she will sleep with you or not, but that's not to say she knows when or when she'll feel comfortable. If she's really interested, well, then it's kind of your game to lose, meaning you can eventually get there if you don't do anything stupid or ill-advised. Why? Well, for the same reason a good doctor avoids a malpractice lawsuit. When a patient feels like their physical health was taken for granted, or the doctor, has really bad bedside manner, and or the healthcare provider just didn't give a damn, well, then people start exploring malpractice lawsuits. And I think the reason why it's a form of retaliation. It's payback. It's one of a few recourses that they have to lawfully punish these medical professionals outside of going on social media and trashing their practice. So kind of following that analogy, most women can't really, they can't best us in physical combat or through intimidation. So whether this issue of feeling, assaulted is legitimate or not, they use the instrument of law enforcement. What are you gonna do? Women want the story that they tell their friends of how a courtship is developing between us men. They want it to reflect well on them. They don't want to appear like they were too weak or taken advantage of, or they're like a whore or too loose, or they just were disrespected. Women oftentimes report how things are going, and they want things to reflect well on them. But if they get dogged out and their female friends happen to get in their ear about what they should do as a recourse to a perceived assault or disrespect, well, dude, good luck with that shit, because it can get ugly really, really quick, and things can get very, very complicated for you. What I would suggest in terms of dating women, if you want to move more towards the conservative side and you want to keep yourself out of jail, or as the inspiration for some villain in a TLC or Lifetime Network movie, I would do a few things and factor in the following: discipline, good communication, knowing your game, and eating what you can eat. Or I'm sorry, eating what you can hunt is what I'm trying to say. So in other words, start slow. Unless you are an experienced and really good at reading a woman's body language and her general personality, I'd say don't even try to kiss her on the lips until the second date if it makes sense. Avoid having her inside of your place where you live, and don't go inside of hers until you've been out maybe a couple of times. If she's cool with holding your hand in public, well, that's a good sign. If she's reluctant or giving you that dead fish, wet noodle, half-ass handhold because she's trying not to hurt your feelings, or maybe she's just not that into you, then I would gently disengage and just kind of, don't make a big deal out of it, but just like let her hand go and like not try that until things are looking obviously, things have progressed in a more comfortable way. But don't aggressively skip steps. Stay methodical. If a woman isn't willing to kiss you on the lips, then why would you skip a kiss on the lips to like grabbing her breasts or grabbing her ass? That's just way too risky for somebody who's not experienced enough, or somebody who's not reading. If you don't have a good read on a woman, if she ever flinches, recoils, or like reacts strongly to a kiss of any type of advance, and that's a time. Well, I think that's a time and place to say something like, "Look, hey, I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. Maybe I read you wrong," and then just sort of stay away from shit like pinning her hands down or ripping her panties off early in the courtship until you have maybe talked a bit about what she likes physically and haven't built a solid rapport. Know she's open for that level of physicality before you take a big risk in that kind of aggression. And women are cool with that, or some women are cool with that kind of aggression. You just have to fucking know and not take big swings at what may be a big strikeout. But when you move in that way, if you are a little methodical, you're moving slow, and you slowly feeding her teaspoons of showing her that you're attractive, well, that shows that you're not a clueless dick, and it fares well with women. But don't turn to some asshole if you're saying shit like, well, what are you here for then? Why can't we have an open mouth kiss? Or why can't we do this? And why can't we sleep together? Dude, you might be taking yourself to the sexual assault express lane, and you don't want to be there. So if you even think you made a woman uncomfortable on a date, then I would say call her as soon as possible and ask, can we walk through what happened? Maybe she'll tell you she likes you and she's just not ready for that step, or maybe you were just reading her wrong and she was cool with everything that happened on a date. So again, work in levels. Hug, kiss on the cheek, hand holding, kiss on the lips, open mouth kiss, and then maybe you graduate to some groping. This is like a safe path. You don't want to start jumping steps again until you've had a good sexual or physical rapport and you know that she's comfortable with you. So that's the end of part 2. That's what I have for you. Part 3 of this topic, next episode, we'll wrap this up with a final analysis. So that's it. Stay tuned for the next episode.